For those who aren't able to connect with their purpose, maybe they're not even clear what their purpose is. Like you were clear that here's my purpose, just to help one person, right? If someone still hasn't even got that clarity or they haven't got the self-belief, what do you say to something like that? Let's say it's a coach, a new coach in the NFL. You've worked with some young coaches who are starting off first time with a big team. And I know from my own experience working with first year coaches, there's a lot of self-belief, but there's also a hell of a lot of self-doubt. Like I've done it here, but I don't know if I can do it here. What would you talk to someone who's starting something off and may not have their connection with their purpose or a full self-belief?
The key first and foremost is just to start serving and start to find ways to help others. Your purpose always involves making a difference and serving others. It always goes beyond you. People are most energized when they're using their strengths and their gifts and their talents for a bigger purpose beyond themselves. So you want to basically find ways to help others by using your gifts and strengths for a purpose beyond yourself. So for me, you start living with purpose. You start living on purpose. And the more you start living with purpose and living on purpose and being intentional to do that, the more you actually have this bigger purpose that starts to flow through you. You start to become a conduit. It's like your small why, which is just being on purpose, will lead you to a bigger why. And that was what I did basically early on. Like I knew, finally I realized I was here to make a difference. It wasn't about me. I was a narcissist. I was focused on myself. I was miserable, unhappy. Once I said I'm going to make my life about others, making a difference and impacting people, right then and there, I just started in small ways. 80 free talks I gave. Anyone who would listen, anyone who would let me speak, I did it. And so I was just serving. And when I went on my first book tour for the Energy Bus, we had 5 people in one city, 10 people in another, 20 people. The most we had were 100 people in Des Moines, Iowa. They thought Jeff Gordon was coming. That's why they showed up. It was not a great tour. It was not successful. And God was showing me even back then, like, it's not about you, John. It's about serving others. It's about making a difference. Like, is this real? Molding me and shaping me. And I'm going back to the early days when it was never about the money, which it still isn't for me to this day. Going back to the early days where I'm just basically showing up and doing the work and making a difference. And it feels great because it's about the vision. It's about the mission. It is about the purpose. And I'm going back to that. And I feel like I'm a rookie again, just living it. But I'm a lot better than I used to be. But I'm making a greater impact in doing this. So I've done all these Zooms, I've been so busy March, April, May, June. I mean, I've been slammed. Actually need to take a break in July, just doing so much for so many teams. But you know what? It's been energizing. And I've also grown. And I'm now prepared for on the other side of this, when things do come back, I'm going to be even better. So that's the thing. You live your purpose and you get better in the process. So you got to remember like why you do what you do. And it's never about the money. It's always about the purpose. So what would you do if money was no object? And then why do you do what you do? So if you're a coach, why do you coach? And you have to understand as a coach why you're coaching. As a leader, why do you lead? What is your purpose with your team? What do you want to see them do? What is your vision for them? How do you want to help them grow? Be intentional with that. Know that. And that will drive your actions.
It's a fantastic, there's 2 things that spring to mind there. One is firstly, that you said, that it's about the mission, and to steal a military adage, the mission comes first. Like when the shit is hitting the fan, the mission comes first. And that clearly applies to military combat scenarios, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, mission comes first. But it applies to our lives as well. Our ability to know that when things are getting out of hand, whether it's on a personal front, you're losing money in your business, whether it is in a relationship, that being connected to the purpose beyond your current discomfort is one of the best predictors of whether you can get through that discomfort. And then the other part that I asked the question about what if someone doesn't know their purpose? You gave a great tip of what are you doing for other people? Like make it about other people. And you also mentioned a coach who occasionally when a coach is young and raw and maybe they're just like an ex-player who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to coach because I kind of like it and I know my shit. There's levels to it. And one of the things is to develop a coaching philosophy, particularly if you're going to be interviewed for a head coaching position. As every season changes, they turn over new coaches. One of the things they're going to want to know is what's your coaching philosophy? Like if you were forced to choose between veterans or youth, what are you going to choose? And if you're forced to choose between this game style or that game style, what are you going to choose? It's basically like, what are you about? And one of the best questions there for those who get stuck on, well, I want to win, It's like, cool. But if you're going in there as a new coach, chances are you're not going to win. Like that coach has been fired for a reason. They're probably in the lower half of the standings. So if it's not about winning, well, let's take it another step further. Why do you want to win? Why do you want to coach that player to be better? And when you ask the 5 whys, you get down to, because I want to make him a better human being, because I want to show the city what's possible. And it becomes about these bigger things that are always about other people.
And what's going to cause you to win? Like, what will drive the winning that you do? So often we focus on the fruit of the tree. So we can look at the outcomes and the numbers and the wins and the losses, or we could focus on the root. If you focus on the fruit, ignore the root, the tree dies. But if you invest in that root, and that's your why, that's your culture, that's how we're going to do it, and your philosophy as you're talking about, that's going to drive you to have great fruit. So you got to know how to invest and nurture your root as a leader, as a culture builder that will drive the success that you have as a team. And if you don't have that, if you don't have that root and you don't have that foundation, you're not going to produce great fruit. And so that's why we see the great coaches and the great leaders who have ongoing success, because they have a philosophy, they have a purpose, and they really know that it's all about the root, and that root will drive the fruit. That's counterculture to the world that just says, I got to focus on the fruit. And I'm always focused on that. And the more you are, then everything else is dying. And then you realize what happens when you lose everything and you realize, oh, why? Well, I was ignoring the root. Marriage, you got to invest in your marriage. You got to invest in your relationship. Most important thing you can invest in. You got to invest in your kids. They're your root. You got to make time for them. I've had to do that and make it a priority. And it's one of the most important things I've ever done, now that you're 22 and 20. You got to invest in your emotional and mental and spiritual health. That's your root. You got to focus on that. You got to focus on your cohesiveness as a team. That's your root. If you don't do that as a team, you will not be as strong. Don't take this personal, but I watched the Sixers, and when I was watching the Sixers play the Raptors, I said, they're a good team when they're winning. But if they start to get down, that's when all of a sudden they actually start to fall apart. And I actually told Nick Nurse, I said, if you guys go further in the series and you go up and they start to have trouble, I said, you got this. Because if they go up and they feel confident, they're a great front-running team, but if they start to have struggles, they're not going to be as good, because I could observe from the outside, they weren't as strong, connected, and committed as they needed to be. And I know that's not, you have nothing to do with that. And you can't even probably talk about that, so don't. But I'm just telling you, I observed that from the outside, working with all the teams I have. When you work with hundreds and hundreds of teams, you start to see it. And sure enough, after the season, you see, okay, well, some of the guys left and blah, blah, blah. They weren't as strong as they needed to be to withstand that. That's the root we're talking about. That's what makes you win a championship, when you have that connection and commitment. Because when you see the team that has it, you know that root is strong, and they will weather the storm and overcome. Clemson, Florida State, 2016. I spoke to the team the night before the game. I said, a storm is coming tonight. You got to withstand the storm. If you want to win this game, you're going to have a storm. You're going to have to overcome it in order to win. Sure enough, they were down. They had to come back like in the last couple minutes to score. They win the game. They overcame the storm. Same thing happened when they played in the national championship. Same thing. This was a team that was connected and committed. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have won a championship.